847 Seattle's Morning News. Dave Ross with Chris Sullivan and Heather Bosch, who's in for Colleen. Chris, of course, is our traffic coach, and he relies on GPS, right?
At times.
I rely on GPS.
But not while driving. I still pay attention.
The reason it's there is so that when you're driving in an unfamiliar area, you don't get lost. And from time to time, GPS, this will shock you, is completely wrong. And the latest horror happened in Colorado, where a bunch of people were trying to take a shortcut to the Denver airport, and GPS basically sent them on an unpaved road, which, because it had been raining, was almost impassable.
Yeah, and 100 people kept following everybody, going, "Oh, the guy in front of me must know what he's doing," or their apps. And this was this was Google Apps, not necessarily Waze. But this isn't the first time. I went back about a year ago. A whole bunch of people drove into Lake Champlain in Vermont in the wintertime because they were told to turn, and they had found themselves out on the ice in the middle of the lake.
Wow.
And this is something I've talked about ever since these apps became popular. Is you've got to be aware because most of these apps, people use them to pick up time, to save time. Not necessarily in other cities, which you said. And I mean, in some cases, to kind of know where you are. I get that. But they use it to beat their commute. And you're driving through neighborhoods, you're driving through school zones, and you just got to be aware that you can't just go tearing through these neighborhoods like that. And you might run into roundabouts. You might run into dead ends that aren't on the map. But yeah, this is silly. I can't believe 100 people stuck in a field trying to get to the airport, trying to game the system.
GPS is so much better now than it used to be. I mean, before they didn't even have it down to it was like a 300-foot distance a resolution, so the turns were all wrong. Now it's pretty good, and so I think people are, in fact, trusting it a lot more than they did. But it isn't perfect.
And my biggest concern with GPS, my biggest trouble I've had with it, for those of us who are directionally challenged, we rely on it a lot. It's when you go into an area with lots of big buildings, or you go briefly under some tunnel and you lose it completely. You come up and you're lost.
Well, I've actually had a case where we were driving in Yakima. We were going to go to dinner. It sent us 2 miles out of town on the freeway just to do a U-turn to come back to the exit, which our hotel was already on. For some reason, it didn't understand that you could go across the freeway and take a left and go underneath the cloverleaf. It didn't realize that it was a height differential there.
You gotta watch Waze, man. It will send you right through the schoolyard. It'll send you right
Seriously,
through the cemetery.
We were driving back to Ellensburg out of Yakima to go to a place that we could honestly see from our hotel.
I have the mighty Garmin, but I'm telling you, there's some infrastructure in the US of A that is no match for it. I was in Boston. Here's how they decided the infrastructure of Boston. They took a handful of spaghetti noodles, threw it against the wall, it slid on the ground, and then they kicked it around, and that's how they patterned all their roads.
Revere, come on.
I swear, at one point, my Garmin looked at me and said, "I don't know, honey, you're on your own," and shut off completely.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got to take these things with a grain of salt, right? Yeah. If you start driving off a paved road, you should probably, a bunch of bells and whistles should go off in your critical thinking skills and be like, this is probably not where I should be going.
Or if your wife says, honey, you might want to put down the phone and trust me.
Well, if I'm driving, Holly she's my co-pilot.
Navigator.
Yeah, she's navigating, so I do what she says all the way around. Because you should not be looking at the thing yourself while you're driving.